Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to Lights and Buttons, and today we'll be going behind the scenes on a tool that I created called the Wordle Assist tool. If you haven't seen this, I do have a demo of this in my previous video, so go check it out in the link of the description below. Now, before we continue, I do want to point out a couple of things. The first thing is that in my last video, I did mention that repeating letters do not work, and in some cases that's true, but in other cases it might still work. For example, I have a screenshot over here on my phone from one of the last puzzles that I solved, and the word is vivid, V-I-V-I-D, and obviously the I is repeating. And if you're trying to solve for a word and the word itself that you're narrowing down to has repeating letters, that's okay. The part that's not okay is if you're trying to specify a letter that is existing and you're telling it that it doesn't exist somewhere else, then that will run into issues. So if that doesn't make sense, go check out my last video. I explained that more in detail and probably a lot better. So I wanted to say that. And also, this tool doesn't always beat a human in terms of the number of guesses. Using the vivid example again, you can see that narrowing this down also takes some cycles to do. And even though you see all the possibilities, it doesn't know right away what the word is. All right, moving on. Now what we're going to do is talk about the high level steps on creating this application. So first thing, you want to download the Microsoft Visual Studio 2022 IDE, or the Integrated Development Environment. This thing is pretty much the software that allows you to create new software. So if you're not familiar with software development, there's tons of tutorials out there. There's tons of excellent sample code that you can play around with, and all you got to do is look it up on Google or YouTube it. But I'm not going to cover all this in today's video. And we're going to build this in C#, so that fits in with Visual Studio perfectly. And then we're going to also need a dictionary file. So what I did was I Googled a dictionary file of all 5-letter words. So that way you have all the combinations of any word that has 5 letters. And we're going to take that file and narrow it down to the correct word. And finally, we're going to plan out the user interface, or the UI, and then the basic flow of the application. And we'll cover this next. So designing the user interface, at the minimum, we'll need some text boxes for the user to enter in the letters of the word that they're guessing. Also, we'll have to have them indicate whether the letter is in the correct position, or if the letter exists somewhere else in the word, or if the letter doesn't exist at all. And finally, we need a button to let the app know to continue on and process what's been inputted. In terms of the flow, we have a few different steps over here. First thing is to bring in the dictionary file so that the application is aware of all the combination of words that are 5 letters long. After that, we're going to wait for the user to input the information. So going back to putting in the letters, seeing if the letters exist within the word, or if it's in the correct spot, or if it doesn't exist, etc. So after that's done, we're going to take that information and build the regular expression, or the regex, to help filter down the words. Now, if you're not familiar with regex, this thing is a whole entire subject within itself, and I wasn't as familiar with it. I've only used it a couple times in the past, and I probably spent like an hour just Googling on regex, so I'm probably not the best person to kind of go over exactly the how to learn regex, except other than I Googled it. But this is a key component to the application because it's used to create a pattern that will allow you to narrow down the list of possibilities for the correct word. And then after that, we'll take that regex string, that filter, and then we're going to run it against the dictionary file and then narrow down the list as we go on, right? And then after that's done, we display the filter results, and then hopefully we'll get to the correct word. The majority of the work will be done in steps 2 to 3, and that's what we'll go through today. First thing, we're going to load the dictionary file. We're not going to go too much into the code. I do have some screenshots of the code here, but the main point is to show you what the main flow of this in a high level, right? So if you're familiar with Java, C, C#, go ahead and look into the code. But if you're not familiar with software development, just kind of ignore the coding for now, and just kind of look at more of the high level things, just so that you understand the flow and not get overwhelmed with the coding itself. All right, so once we have the dictionary file, the application now knows all the 5-letter words that can exist. And what we're going to do is wait for the user to input the data, and basically they're going to plug in their guesses and whether the letters are in the correct positions or not. And we're going to take that and build the regular expression strings based off of the three different scenarios I identified here. So first thing we're going to do in that green box, we're going to take all the letters that are marked as in the correct positions, build a regular expression string, which we'll go over later on. We're going to do the same thing for the characters that are in different positions, so the yellow boxes that you have in Wordle. And then finally, with step 3 in that gray box, any letters that doesn't exist in the word will take into that account as well. And basically, we want to build a method, which is like a C# function. It's a code that you can kind of call over and over again, kind of like a template if you're not familiar with coding. But basically, you have a kind of a template that can be referred to over and over again if you're coding, and that way you don't have to copy and paste the code a bunch of times. But basically, we're going to run that same method 3 times in a row with 3 different regular expressions being plugged into it, and every time you call it, it narrows down the possibilities and narrows down the results. Next, we're going to build the regex code, and basically in my method it has a bunch of if statements to build out the individual characters, and kind of hard to explain here, but basically if you know the regular expression that you're trying to plug in and you're trying to take into account what letters the user is inputting, so for example S exists in a certain location or E doesn't exist, all that kind of pattern gets built out with these methods here. Those are represented by 3 different separate methods. So what do I mean by all that? Right, so the first scenario is finding the letters that are in the correct position. So in this example, I have the word audio that I'm guessing, and I only say the first letter is in the correct position. So in this case, it's going to start building out the regular expression, and in this case, A is the only letter to look for. The rest are dots, meaning that it can be anything. It's kind of like placeholders if I understand it correctly. And then that's one filter that we're going to be building out of the 3. Next thing we're going to look at are the letters that will exist in different positions of the word. And in this case, the filter is a little bit more complex. And then basically in this scenario is saying that the U, D, and I letters exist somewhere, just not in the correct position. That's how it's represented here. And then finally, anything that should be excluded because it's incorrect, this is the regex string that it's going to build out. And next what we'll do is we'll build out a method called filter words, and this will take in a couple of parameters over here. And as you can see, the first one it takes is word list. So you'll be inputting the dictionary files first into here, and then on the subsequent tries, it will take that and narrow it down over and over again until we find a word. The second parameter it takes is the regex filter, so the regex string, and that would be used to filter out your results. And then after that, as you can see, it's a private list string. It will output a data type of a list, and that's the list that it narrows it down to based off of the regular expression. And as you can see at the bottom, we're going to be calling this out 3 different times for the 3 different scenarios that we talked about in the past. Finally, the easy part, display the results that are filtered, and then as you're narrowing it down and as the user is entering in new words to guess, the list becomes smaller and smaller until ideally you'll get down to the correct word. Now, ways to improve this. Now, the first thing is that we can address the bug that we mentioned in the past, where if you put in repeating letters in your guess, there could be a possibility where it'll eliminate the whole list and you get nothing back. The second thing we can do is maybe enhance the interface to make it more user-friendly, colorize it to maybe match Wordle, having the green, yellow, and gray boxes somewhere, rather than maybe those radio buttons. Who knows, right? I've only spent one night building this out, so there's probably tons of opportunities to improve upon this. And then the third thing is automation, selecting the best words to guess so that the user doesn't have to pick words to guess. That's probably a little bit more advanced, and of course I'll have to spend more time if I were to continue this. And the final way to improve is to just ditch the app and try to solve this yourself, right? What's the fun of it if you're cheating in the game? And for me, I think I've only used this like twice just to kind of demo it and just for fun, but The real fun of Wordle is being able to solve your word puzzle without any sort of assistance, whether it's from an app or another person, and this defeats its purpose. Thanks for watching. Again, there's tons of resources online if you're interested in software development. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe as always, and I'll see you in the next video.